Back again today with the 2007 Ford Focus. If you remember from last video, we determined that it had a leaky exhaust valve in cylinder number 4. If you haven't watched that video yet, you can click right here to go back and watch that and see how we came to that conclusion. In today's episode, we're going to remove that cylinder head and have a look at it to see what needs to be done to repair this car and get it back on the road. Let's get started. Here we go. We've already got the power steering pump off of the car because that is the reason why everything failed. So let's go ahead and get this coolant bottle off, but first we're going to have to drain the radiator. Let's go underneath the vehicle. Alright. Just use your pocket screwdriver and open up that plastic just a little bit to get it around the metal clip. No problem. 6mm for this duct clamp. 8mm for the box. That just pops into the rubber that's down here on the frame of the car. Just gonna pop this evap hose carefully off of the cover here, and we're gonna remove this top 7mm. I have a really thin, sharp tip so it can get under there without breaking it. All right, I'm just gonna use this pocket screwdriver here to open up that plastic and get it pushed down and off of that peg, like that. While we're down here, I'm just gonna reach down here and get this evap tube disconnected. Just got to put my finger on the button and pull it out. All right, we've got this connector just down here. I got to remove that. Let's remove the PCV hose. Reach down here, pull that out. These are an 8mm. While we're here, let's remove this plate that holds the throttle cables. Idle air control, let's get that off. Moving just up here now, this is the fuel supply. We're gonna pinch these two pieces of plastic here, just pinch them together and it'll pull off. I'm covering it with a rag because there might be some fuel in there. And there was just a wee little bit. All right, remove the vacuum hose for the fuel pressure regulator. Just pulls off. This is the brake booster vacuum line. I'm gonna go in there with these pocket screwdrivers right above that red ring. I'm just gonna put those screwdrivers in and give them a little twist to push that ring down, and it'll get that fitting up, just like that. I'm gonna use my fingers for the rest of it. Push down on the red ring and up on the fitting. All right, we've got these 10mm bolts for the intake manifold, but there's one underneath, so let's do that one first. All right, so I'm looking just to the passenger side of that oil filter. There's that bolt we gotta get right there. When you tighten the manifold, you wanna start from the inside and work your way out. And you do the opposite to loosen it. I'm gonna unplug this EGR, get that wire out of the way, then I gotta get this next bolt is just next to the EGR here. Here's the next one, it's just behind the oil dipstick. All right, this one is next. Put this down in here. All right, let's just give this thing a bit of a wiggle. Once you have it pulled up away from the starter, which is where that hose lives, you can get in there with a pair of Cobras. Because of the way it's angled, you have to go directly south. It's right underneath it, pointing straight down. And I got it there. Be real careful with this fuel pressure regulator. It's got that plastic nipple on it. I don't want to break that off. All right, the intake's off, so now we got to get the catalytic converter off. That's all part of the manifold, so let's take off this heat shield right here. We've got these 2 bolts and 2 down there. Last 2 are down here. There's one on this side way at the bottom, and that one right there way at the bottom. This is the last bolt. There's 5 of them actually. I said 4. There's just this one here under the upstream O2 sensor. All right, now that we've got that, let's move over here, right down to those 3 connectors there. There's that one. This evac bracket is kind of in my way for pulling up this heat shield, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. And here. Okay, so this harness is gone. Should give me just enough room to pull this up and out of the way. Put it up on the cowl here. I think that's all I need. That was a pain, I won't lie. So that's the bottom of the alternator. We need to disconnect the electrical from it, and also those 2 fasteners at the bottom. And that one at the top. Make sure you disconnect your battery first. To get this thing to fit out from the top, you have to pull the studs out. So take those out and pull the alternator out and put it on top of the engine to disconnect the electrical. All right, I'm going after those exhaust flange bolts way down in the bottom. I've got a long extension and a 15mm swivel. I got to get this second one from the bottom. I can't reach it from the top with that swivel. It's too much of an angle. You want to get these things when they're smoking hot. I can just turn it with my wrench. This bracket holds the manifold to the engine, 2 10mm here, and then 13mm on the engine. I'm reaching through right here where the alternator used to be, and it's a lot easier to get in there. All right, here's that mounting bracket. It was just on the bottom. Now we've got 3 nuts on top and 4 on the bottom of this exhaust manifold, and then everything can come out. As rusty as these nuts are, they're coming off pretty easily. Just pulled it off of these studs here. Some of the studs came out and some of them stayed in. All right, there's the gasket. Let's see if she'll come out a little easier. Oh yeah. So lesson number 1, get the gasket out first. Okay, a baby is born. Let's get this fuel rail out of here. Start with the wiring. 10mm. Those O-rings on the injectors are holding them in the bore there, so I'm just going to use this to help me out a little bit. There we go. Wow. Just like the intake, start from the outside and work your way in a crisscross pattern. We're going to use this very thin blade. This is such a perfect universal tool for all sorts of prying jobs. Plastic panels in the interior of cars. I really like this thing. Oh, I think we got her. There we go. All right, here's something you need to know about this type of engine. It doesn't have timing marks, so you need a special tool to hold the camshafts in time. And it goes back here on the back of the cams. Now you can see right here that we're lined up, but you can't get it in there. And that's because we're at bottom dead center on cylinder number 1. So let's go down there and turn the engine. 21 millimeter bolt here. Just turn it 1 rotation clockwise. You can see there, that's the hole that's going to line up with this hole right there, and that's exactly where we want it. All right, now have a look at these cams. See how we can get that tool in there because that groove is raised up above the top of the cylinder head. Let's go ahead and put that tool in. Wow, that's tight. That is real tight. You got to get this exactly right. I'm going to be reusing these cams and these cam caps, so I need to mark the exact location where they came out of, but I don't have a transfer punch set. So like I said, having a transfer punch is better because it won't come off, so I'm going to be careful with these. Let that paint dry while we're working on the front cover here. Right down there is the water pump pulley, and we've got an idler pulley there. Let's grab that. All right, there's that idler. I'm just going to use this pry bar to keep the pulley from turning while I'm loosening that bolt. All right, now let's go below here and we'll get to the crank position sensor. Interesting thing about this, I looked in service data and Ford says that the crank sensor is not reusable. So once you take this off, you're supposed to throw it away and replace it with a new one. Gotta get rid of this engine mount, 17 millimeter. Okay, that one's still on, but it's loose. Now we're gonna jack up the engine a little bit. Nuts are an 18 millimeter. All right, here's the tools we need. These are special tools for removing that harmonic balancer. All right, you can see that the engine is supported by a jack stand and a block. There's the crank pulley. Now let's go over to this side of the engine. There is a plug. Let's pull this plug out. This is a 10 millimeter. So now I've got the special tool. Looks just like that plug except longer. We're gonna put it in there and just put it in hand tight. All right, with that tool installed now, it's gonna keep the engine from turning clockwise. It won't stop it from going counterclockwise, but now I've got something to put my bar against. We're about ready to go here, but I just wanna give you this warning. The crankshaft pulley and the chain sprocket on the crankshaft are not keyed to the crankshaft, just held in by friction, and there's no going back. All right, I'm putting just a little bit of clockwise pressure on the crankshaft. See how the pulley can spin? The crankshaft isn't spinning, but the pulley is just spinning right on it. Okay, front cover bolts now. There's a total of 22, including these 3 here. These are 13 millimeter. And then right here and right here are 2 small 8 millimeters. And then there's 17 8 millimeters around the perimeter. All right, all those perimeter bolts are out except for this one. It's the last one, and that's a 13 millimeter right over here by the AC. I'm gonna use this pry bar in this notch and loosen that cover. Got my pan ready. It's gonna leak some oil. We're pretty much done dripping, so let's go ahead and get this cover off of there. All right, now this chain's got to come off, so let's go down to that tensioner and release that. I'm going to put this 90-degree pick in this hole here and then push up on the ratcheting pawl, and that releases the ratchet on the plunger. Now I can grab the chain and push that back into the tensioner, and now I'm going to put a pin in it so I can hold it. The chain is loose now, so we can go ahead and remove this tensioner. It's 2 10 millimeters. Now this chain can just come right off. Let's remove the other chain guide, this one. This is an 8 millimeter bolt. We're taking off the camshafts here, so we got to do it in a very specific way. Each cam cap has to come off in a certain order. We'll start over here with number 1. Okay, that was 1 rotation, 4 quarter turns. Let's go with this one, another full rotation. I can pretty much spin all these bolts by hand, so I'm just going to spin these out. Ooh, sustainable recycling. All right, let's get these cams out of here. Intake has that little bump on it. Nothing on the exhaust. Let's have a look at these buckets real quick. I'm going to pull this one out to show you. It's got numbers on the inside of that, and that is the thickness of the tappet. So make sure that if you pull these out, they go back in the same position where they came from, because each one of those thicknesses is a critical measurement to get the right valve lash. Okay, let's move over to this side. We're almost there. All right, these hoses got to come off. I'll show you what I'm working on. Just this EGR cooler right here. This little guy was pretty tough. All right, I'm gonna snake this harness through this way here so I can get to that crossover better. They're an 8mm. Not too tough. Let that drain in my bucket. So there's that, it goes in the parts pile. And there's the gasket, it goes in the trash. I'm just gonna be using a really long ratchet and a T55 Torx to get these head bolts. There's 10 of them. And if you noticed a pattern so far, we're gonna start from the outside and work our way in a crisscross pattern with an extension. All right, now we can go. That is bending it too much. I'm gonna need a 1/2 inch. That's right, when you hear that music, you know I'm not playing around. Let's get these things. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty tight. As soon as there's no pressure from the head on these bolts, they just go limp. You can just unscrew them with your fingertips. And just zip these out with this now. These are torque to yield bolts, so they cannot be reused. Go ahead and just throw these in the trash. Oh, she's a heavy one. This is what I did. I filled all of the exhaust ports with water. Here's number 1. You can see that water is just sitting right on top perfectly. It hasn't gone down at all. And there's no leaks on number 1. Let's go over to number 2. And that looks pretty bad. It's leaked almost all the water out onto the bench there. There's a puddle from number 3. That looks pretty bad also. And number 4 has been leaking as well. So this head definitely needs to go to the machine shop, and I'll get an estimate for that. Now the customer has a choice to make, whether to go ahead with repairs or to change out the engine or just call it quits on that car. But don't call it quits on me. If I do the repair, I'll record it and I'll put that video right over here so you can click on that as soon as it's available.